We are fortunate to be living on the lands of the first people of Australia and New Zealand, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and Māori peoples. It's vital to recognise this connection before any major gathering, allowing us as a society to continue to deepen our understanding and respect for the important cultures on whose land and waterways we call home.
And in the spirit of recognition, Hayes acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land throughout Australia and appreciate their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to elders past and present and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are joining us today.
In New Zealand, a similar recognition is integral. A prayer or incantation is used to invoke spiritual guidance and protection, increasing the spiritual goodwill of the gathering. In New Zealand, this is called the karakia. Te manawa tū, te manawa ora, haumi e, hui e, dai ki e.
At the heart of any great workforce, there is strength in honesty, inclusivity and respect.
Across both Australia and New Zealand, Hayes are committed to supporting the progress of reconciliation, recognition and empowerment in the workforce now and into the future.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning into the Hayes Salary Guide exclusive. My name is Matthew Dickerson, and I'm the CEO of Hayes in Asia Pacific. We're broadcasting live across Australia and New Zealand today to launch this year's Hayes Salary Guide. For over 44 years, the Hayes Salary Guide has provided a definitive industry snapshot and market-leading insight for employers and employees alike, capturing trends, opportunities, and challenges. With over 14,000 responses this year, I'd like to thank everybody who contributed to the Hayes Salary Guide by completing our survey. I'm delighted today to join our host, journalist and news presenter, Narelda Jacobs, and our expert panel live on stage. But first, here's a snapshot of the state of the market and the key findings from this year's guide.
With market volatility, economic uncertainty, and the rapid redefinition of work upon us, looking beyond salaries has never been more important for organisations and employees. Drawing on data from more than 14,000 respondents across Australia and New Zealand, the Hayes Salary Guide extends far beyond the numbers, empowering you to make smarter, more informed decisions. Here's your first look at the data in our Guide to the Guide. Firstly, there's some good news on the horizon. Employers are planning on investing in their headcount, remaining optimistic in their hiring intentions. Not only that, the year of the raise is upon us, with the vast majority of employers planning on increasing salaries and doubling down on talent investment. Whilst not all employers feel optimistic, almost 1 in 3 are expecting the economy to strengthen in the next 6 to 12 months. Many believe investing in their workforce is the key to long-term success. Positive, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. Despite this, employee loyalty is yet to return, with many keeping their options open. Today's skill shortage crisis continues to deepen, putting downward pressure on organisations, with workloads being picked up by existing employees, causing overtime culture to upswing. When it comes to compensation, only 39% of employers pay staff for overtime, with another 30% rewarding staff non-financially, such as time in lieu. 78% of employers say the skills shortage will impact effective operation or growth plans. That's not insignificant. Adding to that, factors like the rising cost of living and falling real wages have meant many employees feel undervalued and underpaid. And whilst staff turnover was down from 58% to 45% this year, many are open to the possibility of moving, with loyalty to be hard won. Only 28% are satisfied with their current salary, with most believing it doesn't reflect their individual performance. The skill shortage is adding another layer, making them more confident to ask for a pay rise. 65% plan to do just that. Feeling up to speed? How will your organisation adapt to meet the needs of current and future employees? And as an employee, what are the non-negotiables in feeling truly valued by your employer? Welcome to the Salary Guide Exclusive, an opportunity to see beyond the numbers. Let's now delve a little deeper into the market insights, salary trends, and emerging workforce themes to help you make smarter, more informed decisions.
So many layers to peel. Kaya, hello. Whether you are tuning in from across Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia, or you are here on Gadigal land at the Art Gallery of New South Wales for our live broadcast, it is lovely to have you with us. I am your host, Narelda Jacobs, and I'm thrilled to be here with you to unpack the Hays Salary Guide. Now, we want you to be part of this discussion too, so please join us by using the chat box to the right of your screen to ask any questions or add insight or your own personal experiences of the trends surfaced today. We will run live polls throughout the session to help guide our discussions, so look out for those pop-ups on your screen. All right, kicking off now, we're very fortunate to be joined by an incredibly insightful panel, including the man you've already met, Matthew Dickerson, Head of Asia Pacific at Hays. Matthew, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Narelda.
We also have Nina Pollard, Head of People and Culture at Coles Group, who's joining us for a second year. Nina, you're back.
Hi, Narelda. Great to be back.
And also Christian Colding, Head of Consulting and Economist at Oxford, rejoining us for a third year. Christian.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Going for the hat trick.
Yeah, you are indeed. All right, let's start with you, Matthew. A key headline this year is that employers are ready to invest more in talent, but employees are keeping their options open. Can you give us a snapshot into this headline and the current state of the market?
Yeah, sure, Narelda. I think undoubtedly when we looked at the data, employers are looking to invest in their headcount and invest in their workforces, and they're doing that in several ways. From my perspective, there's probably two that I'd highlight. And the first one would be they are looking to expand headcount. So almost half of all of the employers that we surveyed said that they were going to increase permanent headcount this year over the next 12 months. And a quarter of those said that they were going to increase the utilization and increase headcounts within the non-perm space for temporary workers and contractors. And the second key area is 95% of all of the employers said that they were going to increase pay rates or give pay rises this year, which is a significant increase from last year. And stepping back and just thinking about that, what are the reasons that we're driving that pay rise? And I think it comes down to four areas. The first one is we're in a skills shortage. Some may say a skills crisis. And there's competition for skills and experience within the marketplace, and that's driving an increase in pay rates. The second area is really looking at the effect of falling real wages within the marketplace. And we've just seen the inflation numbers come out in the last hour, and it is having an impact on employees. And what employers are trying to do is actually stretch their budgets as far as they possibly can to support their employees in what is a bit of a cost of living crisis at the moment. The third area is transparency. So there's increased transparency around pay disparity within organizations, and employers are trying to address those disparities within their workforces. And then lastly, if last year was the year of the great resignation, I probably term this year as the year of the great ask. So 65% of all of the employees that we surveyed said that they were going to ask for pay rises this year, which shows real confidence in that workforce in terms of asking for more from their employers. Now, one of the other things that came out of the data, which I also think is worth referencing, is last year we saw an increase of a 58% in turnover, staff turnover within employers. This year it was 45%, so moderated a bit, but still quite significant. Organizations experiencing an increase in turnover. So employees aren't that settled and are looking for more opportunities. Indeed, 37% of all of the employee surveys said that they would be looking potentially to move roles within the next 12 months.
Wow. Ask and you shall receive. Is it as easy as that? Well, I might turn to you, Christian. All the information that we've heard just there in that package that we heard, does that match up with where the market is at, where the economy is at? I mean, it's so timely and topical, all the things that we're talking about today. And when we see the inflation sitting at 6.8%, that's been revealed. In New Zealand, it's 6.7% at the moment. But is what we're hearing there matching to where the economy is at?
I think it does match. It matches quite well, particularly where the economy is at right now or where it's been over the last 6 months or so, which is when the survey was done as well. I'm a bit of a glass half full kind of guy, so I love this idea that there's a bit of confidence coming through in the labour market. And you're starting to see that in wages growth as well. Finally, we're starting to see a bit of wages growth starting to approach 4% year on year. Seems like a bit of confidence from employees to ask for that pay rise. That should be what we're seeing because we have had a red-hot labour market for not just a couple of months now, but for more than a year. And so that transition from understanding that there's a red-hot labour market to actually getting the confidence to ask for the wage rise and also having the opportunity to ask for the wage rise, because you can't just ask any old day that, by the way, I would love a wage rise tomorrow. Yeah, that's all coming together to start seeing these wages going up, which is really nice to see. And it's just so important at a time like this where it is a cost of living crisis. When we start to ask for a 4% wage rise, a 5%, a 6% wage rise, they seem like big numbers. But then you get CPI coming out today, it's more than 6%. So even at 6% wage rise, you're only just keeping up with the price of living, essentially. So it's important that we ask. What I would say, and that's the glass half full part of me, now this is the economist part of me, which is a bit more dismal. What I would say is now is also the time to ask because we do expect the economy to start softening. So we're not talking recession or anything big, dramatic like that, but it is softening and it's starting to come through again from that cost of living crisis. People just can't afford to buy as much stuff as they used to be able to do. And so that starts to put pressure back on employers, back on businesses in the future. So this is the time to ask. This is the year of the ask. Do it now, because they might not be quite as easy to do in the future from what we can see.
All right, Nina, well, let's turn to loyalty now. Matthew said employee loyalty is hard won at the moment. What are the drivers for loyalty?
Yeah, look, Narelda, there are so many different levers around loyalty, and I think there's no magic silver bullet for it, right? So a competitive salary is absolutely important to get right, but it's really more of a hygiene factor today. And I think post-COVID, we've really seen employees' expectations change. Now we're seeing employees demand different things from organisations. So they're wanting a different kind of leadership, different types of things there. So we're wanting more caring leaders, more about sustainability and inclusive work practices. We still see a lot around career and development, though, that we might touch on a little bit later.
And, what can organisations do to engage their staff and capture loyalty?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of talk in the media about building skills for the future, and this is absolutely critical and really important to do. But I'd encourage employers to think about what are some of those critical experiences they can also give employees. So thinking about how can we use talent programs, for example, as ways to accelerate our talent and also give people those connections. I'm hearing a lot from leaders at the moment that they want those more traditional off-site talent experiences for their team members, so taking them off-site. And this is for a couple of reasons. I think it's because they want people to connect, they want to help them build networks, and I think in this hybrid work environment, creating those opportunities for people to really come together and build those relationships is really an important way to build that engagement and positive culture.
So what sort of changes can be made internally from leadership teams?
Yeah, so the role of the leader is absolutely critical. We know that the role of the leader is to listen and set the tone at the top for expectations. I think that a leadership shadow says a lot about the culture and engagement for an organisation. And if we think about a modern style of leadership, so this humanistic, very caring style of leadership, one that's very personalised, these leadership attributes are really important to help employees thrive in this current environment. And just to give an example, if you think about employee recognition, so the mass market kind of approach, really, we're trying to steer away from that. We're trying to encourage leaders to give really personalised recognition recognition. This can still be digital, so it can still be via email or text or using a digital recognition app. But the important bit is to make it personalised so you can build the relationship, so you can put meaning behind that recognition. And I think this is a way leaders can really lean into how to engage their workforce in this current environment.
Loving this chat. There's so much in those points alone to unpack, which we will get to and narrow that down. It's such an engaging conversation so far. I think you're going to agree. Let's take a moment to review some of the commentary coming from our audience. We have a comment from Michael. I just want more annual leave rather than more money. Another 2 or 4 weeks leave is more valuable than money rather than spend more time with my family. Okay, thanks, Michael. So more leave rather than money. Is that what you're hearing a lot?
I mean, it's interesting, Narelda, actually, when you step back and you look at, there's more to salary. And I think we keep on focusing in on pay and salary. And organizations need to think about, well, actually, what do their employees want? And listen to your point, listening, as your point from a leadership perspective, listening to your employees and thinking about what you can offer them outside of just pay. And that can be a differentiator for you in the marketplace in attracting and retaining talent, which is critically important in the skills short market. Lots of leave or getting more leave. I think one of the things that we see is some of the data, people being able to buy more leave. There's a whole big topic that we can talk about as far as that's concerned.
Michael, thank you for sharing that. I'm really happy that you want to spend more time with your family than be paid or have more money in your pocket. All right, let's move on. There's going to be more ways, of course, to influence the broadcast shortly, which I'm going to be excited to tell you about, including being able to choose a topic you want us to cover. So continue to comment and ask questions along the way, and we appreciate you joining in on the conversation. Moving on to our next topic, and we're going to take you through a snapshot of the skills shortage. Here is Mike Gauci.
Ever heard of a skills recession? Well, we're amid one currently, and it's tipped to stay with us until 2030. I'm Mike Gauci, and I'm about to give you a 90-second snapshot into the skill shortages facing Australia and New Zealand. Let's go. A skills recession is here. Some would call it a crisis. That's harsh language, but it's not unwarranted. We're feeling it even worse than last year, with seemingly no respite in the near future. So, what do the numbers tell us? Today's job market still favours skilled professionals. We know that 88% of employers are experiencing a skills shortage, and that puts the ball firmly in the employee's court when negotiating. In fact, employers recruiting in defence, HR, policy, healthcare and construction are feeling it even more intensely, with 90% or more of these industries feeling the effects of a full-blown skills shortage. In New Zealand, the story is the same. Astonishingly, the trades and labour market told us the skills shortage was as high as 96%. So, what's behind these numbers? Employers are telling us they're struggling to find the people they need with the relevant skills and experience to do their work. In turn, there's additional competition from those employers identifying the small amount of talent that exists in the marketplace. This has big implication for operations and growth plans. The greatest impact being decreased productivity for organisations, but increased workload for employees that remain. How will organisations look to respond? With these factors at play, organisations will seek to expand their talent network and embed future-proof capabilities. To do so, employers are looking to overseas to sponsor candidates at a much higher rate. 62% of employers are upskilling staff. In addition to the technical skills they need, they're also looking for communication and adaptability. And employees, they're looking to be well compensated for their time. Employees are also well aware of what this market presents them in terms of new job opportunities, pay rises and promotions. Ultimately, it's about you. How will you adapt to the skills shortage? No doubt we'll find that organisations will seek that balance between financial reward and the emotional benefits they need to craft a standout package. It's a balancing act. I'm keen to know what the panellists have to say. It's over to you in the studio, Narelda.
Thanks, Mike. I'm curious to know what our panel has to say about this as well. Matthew, I'm going to turn to you. Mike said crisis. Are we in the grips of a skills crisis at the moment?
Yeah, it's a very dramatic
Scary.
term. It is scary, I have to say. And I don't think it's a crisis for everybody, undoubtedly. It's a skills shortage. And interestingly enough, 88% of the organisations that we surveyed said that they were experiencing a skills shortage. So it's affecting everybody. The reality is, it's not a crisis necessarily in all industries. Some industries may say it's a crisis. The interesting thing that came out of all of that, Nerelda, for me as well, was 78% of organizations said that it was directly impacting productivity within their businesses, work-life balance for their employees, and also their ability to grow as organizations, which is a fairly dramatic impact on those businesses, in terms of their own plans as organizations. And also, there's an inadvertent impact as well. We're seeing overtime rates or increase within organizations. The protracted time to bring new staff into organizations is meaning increased pressure, as Mike has highlighted in the video excerpt, for the people that are working in the organizations. And so overtime rates are increasing. Interesting stat that came out of that, Nerelda, actually, is only 39% of organizations actually pay for overtime. 30% give time off in lieu, but it's an interesting environment.
Was that people being honest? I mean, I'm sure there are people watching going, you have to pay for overtime? I hope not. But 39%, that's a staggering figure.
It is a staggering figure, yeah. And I suppose, it's something that we need to address, the skills shortage. Mike also spoke about organisations bringing more talent in from overseas. We've seen a definite shift in the marketplace with more and more organisations considering that to try and alleviate some of the pressures in the market.
So a skills shortage sets off a chain reaction of things that are felt throughout the community.
Exactly.
Christian, I'm going to turn to you now. Can you tell us what is driving the skills shortages?
Yeah, well, I think there's two big factors. Yeah, the one factor, which is the real front and centre, everyone knows it, borders were closed for a number of years during COVID. Makes a big difference in a place like Australia where we import a huge amount of skilled labour. We are still, today, we're about 500,000 people short of where we expected we'd be if it wasn't for COVID. 500,000 people, that's a chunk of people, and that is going to have ramifications for skill shortages. There's no doubt about that. So that's a big, pretty well-known area. The other area, which I don't think is quite as appreciated, is just how much demand for people have changed in any given industry over the last few years. It's not that long ago when whole sectors of the economy was shut down, and so you just couldn't work there. There was zero demand for people, zero demand for skills. Then suddenly they open right up. Not just to open up to what they used to be, there was a whole heap of catch-up. So bang, you needed a whole heap of people coming into this sector from somewhere else. Then now we're starting to normalise again. So you kind of don't need those people as much anymore, but where is the new normal? Is it up here? Is it down here? Is it down here? It's very, very uncertain. And so trying to get those decisions right, and therefore, from a whole of economy perspective, trying to allocate the people in the right places at the right time is really, really challenging. So not just are we short 500,000 people, but also think our ability to allocate the right people to the right industries at the right time has been challenged tremendously because of this huge fluctuation in demand for people across different industries. So there's two big factors at play here. Nice thing is, the borders are open, people are coming, so that should help with skill shortages in the near future. Other thing is that there's still a huge amount of economic uncertainty, but at least we're not opening and closing industries anymore. So over time, that allocation of people to where they're most needed or create the most value, that should start to settle down as well. So that's the outlook for the skill shortages.
Yes, it's a challenge for governments to react by making education free, learning a trade, for example. I wonder in the near future if we'll have an influx of people who can build nuclear submarines and then the submarines will be built and then there's only a limited number of submarines. Anyway. Nina, I'm going to turn to you now from your perspective. Where will employers look to fill the labour gap in the meantime?
Well, let's talk a bit about sponsorship of overseas talent for a minute. So we heard in the video just before 37% of employers are thinking of sponsoring talent from overseas. And this was a really prevalent method used a number of years ago for bringing in skills into Australia. But I'm noticing in the market at the moment there's a hesitancy, there's a bit of a reluctance to uproot and bring a family and relocate to Australia at the moment. It's really important that employers make sure that the offer they're putting forward is really competitive and structured in the right way. Thinking about relocation benefits is obviously really important, but also the topic around pathways. So what's the pathway to permanent residency or not for those relocating? But there is some good news. So tertiary graduates is rising year on year. We're seeing about 20,000 more students entering the labour market each year, which is great news. But there are two issues that I think we need to talk about. And the first one is a little bit around the higher education outcomes. So what are universities doing and tertiary institutions doing in terms of getting their graduates work ready? And so for employers hiring these graduates, how can they help them transition into the workplace, into graduate programs? What does that mean if there is a gap there in higher education outcomes? And the second issue is around there are a lot more opportunities in the market for graduates today. There are jobs available that just weren't around 10, 15 years ago. If we think about the role of an influencer, this is a genuine and legitimate career path. So if someone's creative and digitally savvy, this is a really cool gig that a lot of young people are keen to get into. And I really challenge employers to think about how can a traditional office job really compete with a flexible, cool gig like that.
Oh, influencing.
Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if that's going to be something that you can study at university.
Potentially it is.
I'm sure there'd be an influx of people that would want to study to become an influencer. You have to declare your income, everyone.
That's right.
Nate, what about the rise in secondary jobs? Are you seeing this?
Yeah, we really are seeing a lot of people taking on supplementary work to, really tackle the cost of living. And this is something I think employers need to be really mindful of around health and well-being. So the topic of burnout, it's real. And, when we're seeing employees taking on additional work, taking on additional hours, working overtime, these types of things to generate more income, I think employers need to be really mindful of this as we go forward in these economic times and really take a close look at the health and safety issues with taking on second or third jobs for their employees.
All right, Matthew, I'm sure there are people out there going, I tick on, I'm fine. I'm completely fine with that. We've got our social media covered, but there's probably a lot thinking, okay, we've got a lot to do here. So what's your number one tip for employers wanting to retain or attract talent right now?
As in, Neralda, I suppose salary is important, and we've said salary is important, but as you reference, employees are really interested in learning and development, and actually 61% of all of the employees that we surveyed said that learning and development and formal learning and development programs within organizations was critical and really, really important to them. So I think employers need to think about that and how they actually communicate that to employees as well. They also need to think about career progression. People want to get on and they want to move up. They've got ambition within that, and so how do you communicate that across the organization? And then think about your broader benefits that you provide to employees, and how do you communicate that to them? How do you manage work-life balance and that so that they feel fulfilled outside of just a salary, and then communicate that effectively to those populations?
Yeah, all right, very well, a point well made. Now that leads into our next topic and another insight reel. Nicole Isaacs explores what the guide tells us about the benefits that matter beyond salary and some practical tips to attract and retain talent. Let's check it out.
It's not entirely about salary anymore. Employees are looking for the right mix of benefits, work-life balance, upskilling, and personal fulfillment. The term for this is emotional salary. Hi, I'm Nicole Isaacs from Hays, and as the race for talent heats up across the country, it's good to understand what's motivating employees beyond their paycheck. Employee benefits, complemented by a competitive salary, strengthen an organisation's workforce through incentivising performance and improving well-being, satisfaction and growth of employees. If that's not incentive enough, our data shows that employees value learning and development and career progression as the priority components of a strong benefits program. Employers, well, they're looking to build a skilled and capable workforce, so it's really a win-win. Employees get to strengthen their skills and fast-track their careers, while employers improve the strength of their workforce. Whilst priorities seem aligned, our data shows us that only 1 in 4 are satisfied with their current benefits. That's a big gap when it comes to what's on offer versus what employees want. This is a trend we're seeing strengthen post-COVID. Employees are placing emphasis on additional intangible benefits that positively impact their well-being and job satisfaction, their emotional salary. Key examples include more than 20 days of annual leave, and mental and physical health well-being priorities are also important to employees. We're also seeing for the second consecutive year, 2/3 of employees are looking for hybrid working setups in their next role, and 18% are ready to say goodbye to the office completely. Thank you. How do employers feel about this? Most would prefer their staff to spend more time in the office than they currently do. So what other flexible work practices are on offer? Flexible working hours, part-time employment, purchased leave, and compressed work weeks, just to name a few. Emotional salary will be a big part of the conversation this year. Let's go back to the panel and hear their thoughts.
Right, thanks, Nicole. Now, Nina, in the video, Nicole mentioned some key drivers in attracting and retaining staff. How are you looking to attract and retain talent in industry?
Yeah, look, employee value propositions, or EVPs, have been, a topic of great discussion for many years. So these are the levers that employers might use to attract and retain their particular staff. What's really interesting, I think we're seeing some changes in employees' expectations here. One of the topics that's coming up more and more is around sustainability. And candidates are asking more and more about what are the sustainability credentials of the employers. This used to be a topic that people associated, I think, with youth and early career workers, but actually this is something, as Australia kind of moves to an energy transition and decarbonising workplaces, we're actually seeing this topic come up right across the workforce, which is really interesting. And as we heard in the video, I think we're also seeing employees ask a lot more about health and well-being. So having EAP services or gym membership, these things are great, right? And they're really important to have. But it's really that holistic approach to mental, physical and emotional well-being, making sure there's leader training, making sure that organisations have got the practices in place to support that. So they might do things like support things like Are You OK Day, which is on the 14th of September this year. These kind of symbols, cultural symbols, are really important so that employers can show their employees they really do care about their health and well-being.
If we look at some of those factors, sustainability, for example, and well-being, it's a talking point. When people say, "Where do you work?" and then you kind of share those benefits or the things that you're proud of. We've got a great sustainability record. Is it being valued, Matthew?
Yeah, I think it is being valued, and I think Nina's entirely right. We used to think about it as graduates coming through, and it was important to them from an EVP perspective of who they wanted to work for. But more consistently now across the entire workforce, everybody's communicating around, what's the sustainability, what are the difference my organisation is doing, what's their approach to it. So it is really important, and it's a key differentiator. People will vote with their feet, as far as the employer is concerned, on critical things for the future.
During the pandemic, we heard a lot about sustainability and people saying, "Well, I'm not driving to work, or I'm not getting myself into the city, so that therefore is better for the environment." Is that argument kind of sticking?
I don't think that argument necessarily is sticking, right? Employers are trying to get people into the office more, to collaborate more, and that as well. But it's about making material differences around flying around Australia, as an example, right? Reducing that. They're taking the lessons that we took out of COVID and everybody working remotely and making sure that we use those in a sustainable way going forward. So we don't have to get on planes and see people in person always. We can do it in a virtual environment. All of those things will bring down travel, right? Well, ultimately has a better effect on the environment.
Yeah. Christian, if we can look at, this year compared to the pandemic years, is this our first real snapshot of what the future could look like post-pandemic?
I think it is. You might still get new virus strains and other such things coming through. I don't think we can completely just write off COVID by any means, but it does feel like we're at a point of new normal. And it's nice to hear that working from home isn't this black and white thing anymore. It's a hybrid approach. And it's nice to hear, even from the salary guide, some of the questions, some of the responses coming through, it's about the hybrid approach and the flexibility as opposed to I'm only at home or I'm only at work. So I do think that hybrid approach and how we make that work for every individual person, I think is the new normal.
How do you?
That's a good question. I think it goes back to some of the points that Nina was raising earlier about the importance of leaders listening and really listening to individuals, treating people as individuals, understanding that the needs of someone with a young family could be very different from a early career worker, from someone who has been in the workforce for 30, 40 years. You may even have grandkids to take care of every now and then. So I think it's important. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You can listen. I think one of the really cool things that we've got out of COVID as well is, and maybe this is just my own enthusiasm for data, but it's an appreciation of data and knowing that even though you've got a big workforce, you can actually store information about every individual and treat people differently because you can still understand who's who, who's what, how do they do things. So the ability for data to facilitate the personalisation of the workforce and of hybrid work, I think is fascinating, and hopefully it is the new normal.
And when you talk about loyalty and attracting and retaining staff, listening to what employees want, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think there's lots of different things that people are going to want. As you said, Christian, listening to and understanding what the different needs of our different segments of our workforce are is really key to making sure you can differentiate your offer as an employer. So you're tapping into those individualised needs, but making sure you've still got a fair and equitable base on which to work from.
Matthew, do you need to see people to know that they're productive?
No, and I think that's one of the points I think we need to think about. We need to educate and help our leaders to be able to understand in this new world that you can use data to personalise things at scale for your workforce. And you don't have to see people to manage them effectively. You can look at the data and you can look at outputs, which is a completely different way of managing than historically people did. One of the things as well, I think, from an education perspective that we need to be considerate of is something that's been discussed in the media for a number of years now, which is called proximity bias, and the tendency to favour those people that are close to you, that you see on a day-to-day basis. And in a hybrid world that we're operating in today, it's something that leaders need to be really, really mindful of, that they don't ultimately end up with bias in their decision-making because they're favouring those people that are in close proximity to them. And the same goes for employees. You need to be aware of the concept of proximity bias and make sure that you're managing accordingly and making sure that you're communicating effectively within the business about what you're actually doing as well.
Yeah, so in a hybrid model, then how do you maintain that sort of proximity, or how do you see what people are doing at home or maintain that relationship?
And I think you've got to be intentional about it. Right? When we were all sitting at home and working remotely, everyone was like equitable. Yeah. Whereas in the new world, with a hybrid, some people are in the office, some people are at home. You need to be much more intentional as a leader to make sure you're engaging across your workforce and considering everybody. And the same from an employee, you make sure that you're actually contributing, you're engaging with your colleagues on a day-to-day basis to overcome that proximity bias or the potential for proximity bias. And then as an employer, I think you need to think about the data. Are you making data-based decisions, or are you making decisions based on who's been near you in the conversations that you've had?
Maybe that's part of the year of the ask, because you've got to ask the question, because you're not seeing everyone sort of on a daily basis to know potentially know what the needs are, maybe. But what about when you can't work from home? I mean, we heard a lot from GPs and surgeons and people in the medical field that you have to be able to see your patients, and they were even thinking outside the box as to how they can not have that time in the surgery. But there's heaps of other industries where you simply can't work from home.
There certainly are, and it was quite interesting looking at the salary guide and looking at some of the industries that are suffering from the worst skill shortages. Something like defence is up there, and construction. They're two industries you can't really do from home. I suspect some of the reasons they're up there, both they've increased in demand, but also you need to be there, and that's harder to attract people into that space now. There's so many roles that can be hybrid, there's so many roles where you can work from home, so you've got a bit of a competitive disadvantage all of a sudden that's emerged for industries where you have to be there in person. So what do you do about it? Well, you need to accept the fact that is the construction sector, for example. What's nice to see with some of the work we've done in the construction sector is a way that companies are trying to overcome it is by giving a greater sense of job security, by moving from project to project basis and a very much a subcontractor basis to now saying, okay, well, we're going to do this type of work for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years because there's tons of demand out here. And when you're starting to think about, well, how do you then upskill people? How do you make sure you've got an experienced workforce? That's how you can do it. You can give them that transparency that there's a nice long leadway of work here. You know, you don't need to just come in and then you dig a hole one day and then you build a house another day, which are completely different skills, and you're making a road a third day. Yeah, you can start specialising and you can give that job security by saying, well, there is actually need for your skill set and we appreciate your type of experience if you work with us for the long run.
So people appreciate security, to feeling safe that they're safe in their job for the future, regardless of how high inflation rates go.
I think so, and I think actually it's interesting because some industries you've always appreciated that, but a few industries now are starting to realise that. You know, taking another industry as an example would be the tech sector. We went for at least a decade where if you worked in tech, there was only one way, and that was up. You know, we just needed more people, it was more growth, more people, more growth. All of a sudden we've realised, there was a correction in the tech sector. Interest rates went up, the return on equity, return on the investment just wasn't as strong as you expected. And we're seeing a lot of people in the tech sector out of jobs. You know, all of a sudden, I think the value of job security in a sector like tech has shot up, which chances are in the past, it wasn't about that. You get a bit flippant and say it was more about the beanbags than job security. But, you know, these days, job security is certainly something that becomes important. And I think as we reach this inflection point with an economy slowing down over the next year or so, you know, job security becomes a more and more important aspect of the employee value proposition.
Sure. The ability to work from home also saw people move from the big cities into the outskirts or regional areas because they could work from home as long as they had reliable internet. So then where does that leave the economy now, if you could kind of take a bit of a snapshot of where the regional versus cities, and is that a trend that's going to continue? Are people going to be wanting to move back into the city, or...?
It's hard to say. I do think, again, there was a strong period before COVID where it was just about becoming more and more urbanised. We were all coming into cities. It was more and more popular. That shifted during COVID. Chances are it was an opportunity for people just to revise what are their values, what do they want? Do they want more space? Do they want to be in the city? The fact that you've had that change during COVID is probably a good thing. It probably corrected some behaviour that was starting to trend. Now, are we going to see minor corrections in the future? I think so. But again, we haven't emerged from COVID and gone back to the pre-COVID world. We're in a new world wherein there is a lot of hybrid working. There is opportunities for people living in the regions, working in the city. I think there's a much greater appreciation of the regions as well from the city. You know, you've suddenly started appreciating your local tourism. You've appreciated the value of the local restaurants in the regions. So I think we're probably in a better place now. Are there still going to be fluctuations? Absolutely. But is it going to be a complete correction back to what life was like pre-COVID? I certainly don't think so.
Matthew, the new world it sounds really exciting, actually. Are a lot of employers seeing this as a total reset? And have they kind of emerged from the pandemic years, which are behind us? I think we can say that they're behind us, although they're, touch wood. Are they seeing it as a reset?
I think they're seeing, obviously, we went from one extreme pre-COVID to another extreme in COVID, and it's now kind of returning to a new normal. As Kristen said, it's not going back to pre-COVID. I don't think we're quite at the new normal yet. You can see it in the media and that there's a tension between employers and employees. Some of the data that's coming out in our survey in terms of hybrid working and employers wanting employees to come back into the office a bit more than they are today. And I think there's a tension that exists there. And I think...
Not on Fridays, though.
Yeah, not on Fridays. 4-day work week, that's another area that lots of people are talking about. You know, is that something that we should start to consider as well? I had a conversation last night, actually, with a colleague over in France talking about a manufacturing client, actually, that has a 4-day work week. So it's something else that is a topic of conversation, probably outside of the salary guide, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he works workplaces doing that, just incidentally? Are they doing it independent of any, legal
Yeah, there are some,
requirement?
right? I know Unilever is one of those that was referenced in New Zealand that did 100-80-100, so 100% of the pay, 80% of the work, 100% of the output. And their study in New Zealand actually came out that they were as productive on that basis as before, and now they're rolling out a limited trial here in Australia as well. So yeah, I think it's something that a lot of organisations are considering into the future. Not legislated or anything like that yet, but people are broaching the subject.
I just think there's such monumental change that it's dynamic and it's changing month to month as we're living through these times. It's really fascinating. There is so much more to unpack in the guide, but we want to understand what's important to you. So this is your opportunity to have a say on what you'd like to hear our panel discuss next. There are pop-ups on your screen now which will take you to the poll. We've highlighted some key themes surfaced in this year's salary guide, and we'd like you to vote now via the poll on the topic you'd like our experts to unpack. So the themes are, number 1, the workforce revolution, survive or thrive. Number 2, upskilling, the learning imperative. Or number 3, diversity, equity and inclusion, the time for action. Now, while we wait for your votes to roll in, here's a quick snapshot of the topics that you are voting for. The workforce revolution, survive or thrive. We uncover how organisations are transforming in instances like restructuring, digitisation and headcounts, and where the opportunities are for major growth. All right, that's your choice number 1. Choice number 2, upskilling, the learning imperative. How organisations can look to upskill their existing talent, what skills organisations are prioritising now, and which will be needed for the future. And your last choice is diversity, equity and inclusion, time for action. So diversity, equity and inclusion, or DE&I, has been a popular ambition for decades. Yet the change moves slowly and we forecast another several decades before we successfully solve basic ambitions. Nina, several decades before we reach
It's sad
our
but
ambition.
true. It's sad but true. Can you believe it? It really is. The data is showing us if we keep going at the pace we're going at the moment, it is decades away before we reach gender representation and equity in workplaces. It's just unbelievable.
Matthew, I'm really glad we've long known it as D&I, diversity and inclusion, but I'm very happy to hear or to see diversity, equity and inclusion. The equity is a really important factor in that.
Yeah, and I entirely agree. I think equity and thinking about people's background and experience for generations before, and how do we actually support equity within the workforce? And that comes back to the personalisation concept. People don't have the same start point in life. And so we need to think about how do we support people so that we drive that equity in organisations ultimately, and that provides that equity over time.
That result came in exceptionally fast. Thanks everyone for being really quick with your trigger fingers there. Christian, you're the economist. Good with numbers. We've got them right in front of us. An overwhelming majority has voted for the workforce revolution, survive or thrive. Did that surprise you, or did you think that's where we were headed?
Oh, it surprised me a little bit, but I'm a big fan of that topic, so I'm actually quite pleased that we're there. I do wonder if it was rational man just kind of picked the first, the easiest topic. So maybe that quick with your fingers, number 1 seems like a good bet.
Speaking of that kind of looked a bit like automation to me. I'm going to throw this first question about surviving or thriving in the workplace revolution. What impacts do you think automation will have on the labour market?
I'm a sucker for change, and I think something like automation, something like ChatGPT, it's really exciting, and it's something to be embraced. What automation allows us to do is to be more productive, particularly in the service and the knowledge sector. And that's a good thing. So it means we can do more with less. Now, it's a bit scary when the less bit is our jobs, of course. But you have to remember, maybe if you go back and you have your own experience, last time you went to your boss and said, guess what, I can do this in 4 days rather than 5. Chances are they didn't say, well, we're going to make you part-time now. Chances are That's fantastic. Now you can do this as well as those other 4 things. So you still get to work your 5 days, and you just get to produce more. Now, it seems a bit, bit bad. You just get to do more work. But that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing for the economy, and it's what really drives our living standards in the economy, in society as a whole. Taking it to extreme, and you think, okay, well, doctors, if they can operate on 10 people a day rather than 8 people a day, that's fantastic. We can save 10 people's lives. Farmers, if they can milk 100 cows a day rather than 80 cows a day, that's fantastic. More people can access milk, more people can afford milk. We can all have more milk in our diets. It's a little bit different for consultants. We don't save babies' lives every day by any stretch. But again, by us being more productive, you get more out of people. That means there's more exciting opportunities for people to grow and develop. And suddenly that's the driving force of economic growth and our growth in living standards. So something like automation, it's a great thing. Got to embrace it. Yes, it means you need more with less, but it probably means that you get to do more. And chances are you get to do more interesting stuff. And it's kind of a win-win.
Has anyone had a speech written by AI, by the way? I haven't, but I just wanted to put that out there. Not a serious question. Matthew, I'm going to go to you. What were the major findings in the guide for transformations?
So I agree entirely. Automation should provide significant opportunity. And we saw that actually 64% of the organizations that they surveyed felt that the skills makeup of their organizations were probably going to change over the next 10 years as a result of AI and automation.
Maybe we will have our speeches written by AI in the future.
Well, some of them maybe, right? Some
Already
of them can
are.
help us on some of that part.
Yes.
So it's interesting that organizations are recognizing that their skills have to change. It comes back to what's the skills that we're bringing into our business and how we plan for that into the future. The other part that came out from my perspective out of the data, which was quite interesting, that 69% of the organizations surveyed had done some form of restructure in the last 12 months. So organizations are already transforming, already changing things, and 35% had actually digitized some of their processes. So it's happening right now, and coming to Christian's point, I think it's just going to gather pace into the future.
And new jobs are then created because of that transformation.
Yeah, and there's in the data, it's almost a 50-50 split, but half the organizations thinking that they're going to be able to reduce headcount as a result of automation, and half of the organizations saying they're going to increase headcount as a result of automation. We'll see where the balance ultimately ends up, but ultimately I think they'll become much more productive and provide more opportunity for people to do more of what they're good at as opposed to things they're not good at.
And how have temporary and contract workers offered agility for businesses?
We still see, I think it's about 68% of organizations, they utilize temporary and contract workers to address short-term skills demand or demand for workers within their businesses. And that's been typical. But we're seeing an increased rate of organizations bringing in temporary workers and contractors to address specific skills gaps within their business and to evolve and progress their businesses from a skills perspective as well. So that is shifting.
Nina, how does collaboration work for hybrid workplaces?
Yeah, I think this topic of productivity is really an interesting one, and how do we get the innovation into organisations so that we can, meet those productivity and new work expectations. And collaboration is obviously really key to that. And collaborating in a hybrid work world is a little bit different, but there are some great digital tools that can actually facilitate this. I don't know if anyone's used Mural, for example. It's one of those tools where you can still do whiteboarding and post-it note exercises that I know we all love. These types of digital tools are really useful in a hybrid workplace. So you can still do that collaboration and connection with your colleagues, but you can be in the office in person, or you can also be, working from home. So I think these are the types of tools we really need to be thinking about in this new world of work.
I think I'm ready to imagine a world without sticky post-it notes everywhere. I don't know if I'm the only one here, but Nina, you spoke earlier about the employees' need for connection and camaraderie. How do these major transformations affect culture?
Yeah, I think being really deliberate about how we're going to help our team members form connections in a hybrid work world. It's a really difficult one to, crack the nut of, because, how do you form those norms, those rituals of behaviour that really form a culture? But I think in this hybrid work world, you can actually absolutely form those connections with employees. And I think there's a little bit of innovation that's needed in technology to help us do that when you're having virtual meetings. When you've got some people around the table, some people in person, I think the technology is going to catch up. So it's a seamless kind of experience, whether you're in person or, working from home.
Does it mean social activities become more important then?
Yeah, I think thinking about what are the social activities we're going to do as an organisation, when are we going to ask people to come together in a deliberate kind of way to build those networks, build those relationships. I think that's something that organisations are going to think about more and more. How do we carve out that specific space and time to do that so that people can really, build a connection and form those relationships?
Yeah. Christian, I'm going to turn to you now. What kind of considerations would you recommend for strategic economic planning in the face of major transformations?
Oh, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? I'm glad I'm not answering that question.
There's a lot. I think there's two big things. One would be the mindset, and having an open mindset, embracing change. I mentioned that before with automation. I think that is just so important to everything. From an economic perspective, there's nothing better than a bit of scenario analysis and scenario planning. Just sit back, have a glass of inspiration juice, and think about what could the future look like? Let's think about net zero and climate change. How do we get to net zero? Well, you need to have a bunch of windmills, a bunch of batteries, a bunch of solar. Okay, well, how are we going to achieve that? You need to build it. Okay, great. You need to install it. We need then, therefore, a new grid, new electricity wires, new poles. Okay. That's starting to get the ideas to flow. Then the economist comes into the room and says, well, that's all going to be very expensive. How are we going to keep prices down? Because if prices go up too quick, we're going to have higher interest rates. And we've already got high enough interest rates. So how are you going to decarbonise and get to this net zero world without causing higher prices and therefore higher interest rates, therefore a slower economy? That's the type of thinking you can do when you start running out these scenarios. Not trying to predict exactly what will happen, but think about what could happen and how do we make that happen in a really positive way. So I think that scenario planning, giving time for scenario planning, giving time to think about the future without forcing yourself to having to be right, I think is a really powerful tool for managing this sort of stuff.
Matthew, in a lot of ways, are employees driving this work revolution because of the things they're having more confidence to ask for?
Yeah, undoubtedly they are. And I think as a result, leaders within organizations have to be much more agile. When we looked at the data as well, organizations saw agile thinking and agile leadership, critical thinking, as really, really important for the future. And that's just demonstrating the environment that we're operating in today has significantly changed from where it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Some people look at change, you love change, you've already said that, but some people look at change as being an evil, that they don't know, where the world is headed, and they're very resistant to change, but you just have to be able to change.
Yeah, in today's world, change is happening all of the time, very fast around us. There's so much more to take in on a day-to-day basis. I think, having that mindset, that change mindset, and then growth mindset, which ultimately embraces change, is going to be important for employees' success into the future.
Yeah, yes.
I do think I just have to jump in there because I do love change, but I also recognise the risk. There is a risk that you take. You get left behind. You don't have to do much wrong when all of a sudden things just didn't work out, when you're in a cost of living crisis like we are today. So while change is great and we want to embrace it, it is just so important that as leaders we're cognizant of the fact that people can fall through the cracks really quickly. As a society we're cognizant of that fact, and we make sure that there is that safety net, because it doesn't take much just to be a bit unlucky over a 6-month period and suddenly your situation is just very different from what you were expecting. Yeah. So that safety net, I think that's an important part of being able to have a change mindset.
That's a very good point, considering the cost of living crisis that we're working in, that we pretty much started this conversation about. So a really lovely way to wrap that up. are actually coming to the end of formalities. It's been wonderful to get your insights. A really stimulating discussion. And Matthew, I'm going to ask you now to close. If you could crystallise where to from here for both industry, employers and employees. Matthew.
Thanks, Ronaldo. For employers to stand out in today's skills short market, invest in your people, whether that's through salary increases, upskilling, or additional support. Also, review the broader package. Consider what else you can do to attract and retain talent, such as opportunities for growth, well-being days, improved recognition, work-life balance, or a more inclusive culture. And for professionals with skills in demand, you still have bargaining power, but it's important to temper it to avoid pricing yourself out of consideration. Yes, employers are investing in salary increases, but margins remain tight. Budgets only stretch so far, so consider the whole package when you negotiate a new job or your next pay rise. Your combined package can go a long way to bridging possible financial expectations gap, so think about what really you value and what could make a difference to your life and your career long term.
Matthew, thanks again for hosting us, and thank you for allowing us to talk through all the details that are in the Salary Guide. And thank you for joining us today at the Hays Salary Guide exclusive. A big thank you to our wonderful panel, Nina and Christian. It was really great to have your commentary and insights to help us see beyond the numbers and further unpack the guide. The Hays Salary Guide launches today, and we hope you find it a useful tool. We thank you for engaging with us and sharing your comments and questions in the chat. And we hope to see you again next year for the Hays Salary Guide exclusive. Buddha.